And for some odd reason, they called it off and they said, we know he's not in the lake.
Wow. So for those paying attention, so 7 a.m. is when there's a crime scene discovered at the Lafayette Township. Can't find him anywhere. 9 o'clock that morning is when they find the car.
Somewhere around that time they found it.
And they find the car miles away. And car's discovered in a parking lot, parked appropriately.
No, he just pulled in and stopped rather than he turned into a parking spot. That's why it stood out when the jogger went by. It was just kind of strange for her to see the car the way it was.
Does somebody call it in, or who calls it in?
OnStar. And then they said,
right.
we found it. And Linda Bowers relayed to me during one of her interviews.
3.9 miles, by the way.
She heard the address and she thought the car was in the lake. That's the address they use for the lake. And so there was a little bit of chaos going on there. And I really think he wanted to be found. So because of the other two firemen, but that's where they found everything.
All right. So obviously now everybody knows that that's the new crime scene or potential crime scene because there's a car there.
It depends where at the crime scene, they called in BCI right away because BCI did all the investigation at the scene. Contrary to what a lot of people are saying, why did the sheriff do it? It was BCI.
What's BCI for those
Bureau
listening?
of Criminal Investigations. They work directly for the Attorney General's office.
Okay. And why would they be called in?
They're experts at crime scene analysis. Gotcha. And they had somebody there with blood who understood blood.
And there's also very few homicides that have ever occurred in Medina County.
And it's not long before the sheriff's like, let's get an expert in here right now. I mean,
we cannot find records of a homicide in Lafayette Township dating back to 1960.
Wow.
So,
all right. So BCI is on the case.
The next step after that, they sealed off the car, took it in for BCI to process it at some garage, and everybody else is still in a panic. Where's Bryon? Where's Bryon? And they couldn't, of course, nobody had any idea. Yeah, and Linda Bowers went with the officer to go to the house because they wanted to know what was going on. Now, Bryon had been bragging about all these guns he owned. He said he had 3 AR-15s. I mean, all kinds of things. And pretty much, if you listen to everybody, what he was telling them, he had an arsenal in that house. So when they walked in, Linda said, Bryon's gun here. Because she knew Bryon pretty well. And Victoria said, we don't have any guns. And Linda was telling me during one of the interviews, she tapped the cop on the shoulder. Let's go outside. Goes, just for shits and giggles. Call up and find out if Bryon's CCW is active because he used to brag about having it. He never had one. So all of a sudden, all these red flags are starting to pull up. Then they didn't have the passwords to Bryon's computer and things like that started going on. And so all of a sudden, the mystery started taking shape. And I think around 10:30, if I recall right, one of the officers sat down with Victoria Macron and interviewed her. And there were red flags coming out of that. I mean, during that interview, she said, and this caught the and she said, well, Bryon was in Houston and he came home early because there were a bunch of Indians there, people of Indian descent, and he doesn't like Indians. And I'm going, she really said that?
She literally says that in the interview?
In the interview, that's exactly what she said. And it just, okay. And so there were a few things that she said like that, which were setting off some alarms in my head. I mean, you're a police officer. Red flags go up. You would notice it faster than anybody else would. And it was about an hour-and-a-half interview, I believe. And she made claims later on that, well, the sheriff's department never talked to me. They interviewed her 3 times in the first 4 days. Then she lawyered up, which was a little strange too. The only person who ever lawyered up during all this was Victoria Macron. And that was not unnoticed by law enforcement. And so next thing you know, out of the blue, Tom Miller, the sheriff, called up and says, I don't want anybody around the lake. We know he wouldn't allow him to do that. And for some odd reason, they called it off and they said, we know he's not in the lake.
Wow. That led, I mean, fast forward to a year later, his body shows up in the lake. Surprise everybody.